Hello YouTube! So I recently read Landline by Rainbow Rowell and I loved it so much. I wasn't even planning to make a review of this book, but I'm doing it anyway because it was so good. This book is definitely a contender for favorite book I read this year, tied with a few other ones. We'll see. We'll see at the end of the year which one ends up being my favorite, but this one was great. So I love Rainbow Rowell. I've read Eleanor and Park and Fangirl this year, and so I obviously had to get her new book. I was surprised to find out that the main character of this book is in her mid to late 30s, actually. It still reads like YA. I'm not really certain why exactly it feels that way. Maybe just because I have read other books by this author, and so it sort of felt familiar, and so I just read that way. But I really enjoyed it, and actually, not gonna lie, it was kind of a nice break to read a book about an adult. I usually read YA, as you guys know. I really like YA. I think that the books just have a different tone that I appreciate because there's still like wonder and hope, and a lot of books about adults don't really have that. They don't have that sort of like I can change the world attitude that a lot of YA characters have. But I really liked reading this book and it made me feel good about my life decisions. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this is a book about a girl named Georgie McCool who works in TV writing. She has a husband named Neil and 2 kids, and she also has this writing partner named Seth who's sort of been her partner in crime for years and years and years, and they've worked everywhere together and they work really well together. And in this book, Georgie and Neil's marriage is not like failing and not like they're not sort of like actively having problems, they just sort of always had problems, and they've just had this sort of large rift growing between them because Georgie is sort of a slave to her work and is sort of always on the breakthrough of something big, and that means that Neil has to pick up the slack for all the times that Georgie isn't home or comes home late or whatever. And so it's a book that sort of makes you look at your life. I mean, it makes Georgie look at her life and her choices and whether or not it can keep on going that way or if Neil would be better off without her or what. It was also really nice reading it now before I have a family and I'm married and all of that stuff to make sure that there's just things to keep in mind about how you treat your partner and when it's the right time to have kids and all of that. So that was all interesting to me. The cool part and the interesting part about this book is that Georgie and Neil are in different places for most of this book. He goes to Omaha and she stays home. I guess that's sort of a spoiler, but like, it's a book about being on the phone. So they had to put them far enough apart to need to be on the phone. She starts realizing that the Neil that she's talking to is not her Neil. In fact, it's Neil from before they were married when they were first dating. And I just really like the way that this book deals with that because everything else about this book is really, really set in the real world and not magical. And so Georgie kind of thinks she's going crazy, and you just watch this sort of downward spiral as she clings to being able to talk to Neil before they had all of these big problems, and you know, her trying to figure out if it means that she's supposed to solve something or whatever. It's just such a funny, poignant, heartwarming book. There's parts that'll bum you out a little bit because obviously it's a character that you really like having problems in her marriage, and it's not like a fun thing to deal with, but the way that it handles it makes it really real. A thing that I really like about this book is that there isn't a villain. Georgie's sort of the one that's like more to blame for their problems, but it really does feel realistic because they've both actively done things that have aided in their marriage kind of crumbling a little bit. And even though it's like really apparent that Georgie's the one who comes home late and all of that, you're reading it through her point of view, and so you also understand her motivations. She wants to be a TV writer, she's good at it, and she has this opportunity that could possibly bring her own show with Seth, and so you get that, you know, you understand. You aren't rooting for her to not do this thing, because if you're anything like me and you know what it feels like to have either like an impossible dream or, you know, to really want a career in one of these difficult creative fields, you understand what it feels like to work as hard as it possibly takes to get there. And so you understand what Georgie's going through, even if you know, you like her family and you want her to be around them all the time. And also there's a lot of drama. Not really drama, but there's, you know, there's the conflict of her writing partner being this guy Seth that doesn't really cause like jealousy but does. And again, Seth is never a bad guy. There's even points where you're like, God, she should just be with Seth, but no, she shouldn't because you also love Neil. And so it's really tough because in all of these situations you understand why Neil is upset and you are rooting for him, but you also understand and like these other characters, and no one's really wrong. And so it's very much like real life in that respect, because there isn't always, usually isn't a clear-cut villain, you know? There's people who have conflicting needs and wants, and being in a relationship is hard, you know? There's no, I think it even says this in the book, like there's no two lives that just fit together perfectly like a puzzle piece. It's always work, trying to make sure that this person you've chosen to spend your life with wants the same things out of life as you do. I really liked all the characters in this book. Seriously, all of them. I loved Georgie's family. Her mom was hilarious. Her sister was hilarious. I loved the side plot with her sister that I won't get into because I don't want to spoil it. I also loved the side plot with the pugs. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but I was cracking up, and I just really want people to read this book. I really liked it. I think that Rainbow Rowell did something really different. That's all I'm going to say for now. Go read this book. You can get it anywhere books are sold, I guess. And then tell me what you thought. If you have already read this book, let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. I just wish, I don't know anybody else who's read this book. I just need someone to talk to about it. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.